Well, welcome everybody. It's nice to have you here. Thank you for joining this, I think, very interesting discussion today that we'll have with important, very distinguished speakers. So it will be, I hope it will be very interesting for you because. This topic has been on the agenda for a long period of time, but somehow this is now sort of being and we don't see the question of NATO enlargement on the agenda of the alliance for one of the most strategically most issues for the alliance and for allied members, I'll say. But currently, we see more attention to but kind of NATO enlargement stays in the shadow of all these developments that are happening with the changing security environment internationally and also changing security environment in the Black Sea with the war, with ongoing war in Ukraine, and also with some other geopolitical changes and shifts that are happening here. And plus domestic developments in some of our countries. I don't want to jump in. Probably our speakers will explore it a bit later at in a better way. But before that, just because we have this slightly informal discussion, this is how I call it, in order to warm things up. That's why I will briefly introduce our speakers. Thank you all for agreeing to be part of this discussion. I think this is really important. All of them, they have extensive experience working in the area of security and foreign policy. I'll start with Tornike Parulova. Thank you, Tornike, for being with us. Tornike is Georgian diplomat and security policy professional, formerly serving as security director of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, holding the diplomatic rank of minister plenipotentiary. He held several senior positions within the ministry, including deputy head of mission of Georgia to NATO. And throughout his career, he devoted a lot of efforts to NATO-Georgia cooperation, to Georgia's NATO integration processes, including overlooking around 15 major projects, including within SNGP, including Kabul evacuation process, which was very, very tremendous for Georgia and for Georgia's transit capabilities. And he also authors multiple articles on different issues, and currently, among many other things, he is also chair of Board of Advisors of Strategic Security Initiative, which organizes today's event. And thank you once again for agreeing to accept my invitation to be part of the team. Next for us is George Balint from Moldova. Again, Mr. Balint, thank you for being with us. He is Moldovan diplomat and security expert with more than 25 years of experience in national security, defense, and conflict resolution. He served as Deputy Prime Minister for reintegration of the Republic of Moldova. Also, he was a state main counselor to the Prime Minister and State Secretary of the Ministry of Internal Affairs. Previously, Mr. Balint headed the Bureau of Reintegration and has long served as a permanent member and expert of the Joint Control Commission. Of course, his biography and his experience is very large. Currently, he serves as the head of NATO Information Center in Moldova. Thank you once again for accepting the invitation and being with us. And last but not least, our colleague and our speaker from Ukraine, Dr. Maxim Hilko. Thank you once again for being with us. He is a chairman at the East European Security Research Initiative and associate professor at Comenius University. Previously, he worked as a senior researcher at the Taras Shevchenko National University of Kiev, at the Foreign Policy Research Institute of the Hennady Udovenko Diplomatic Academy of Ukraine under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, and at the Information Analytical Department of the Fund of the Presidents of Ukraine. And of course, Dr. Hilko has extensive experience also both in academic cycles and professional cycles. Once again, thank you for being with us. And having said that, I would like to open this discussion before asking my first question and giving the opportunity for speakers to elaborate on experiences of each country on the path of NATO integration and what was the experience, what is what is the current reality, and in general, just to provide a short overview. I would like to ask the audience to ask questions. You can ask questions in the Q&A section, and I will read that in the last 15 years. We'll have the last 15 minutes for that. Please make sure we'll have an engaging discussion, and I hope you'll enjoy that. So now I would like to start with our dear speaker from Moldova, Mr. Valen. Please, the floor is yours. Please elaborate for us what is the experience of Moldova on the path of NATO integration, and how would you elaborate the situation for us briefly? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. From the beginning and in 90s, our approach, our understanding was to, let's say, to make some changes and to move forward towards joining to some alliance. But due to fact in 92, it was a war in Transnistria and we was attacked by Russians and part of our territory was till now under occupation. In 90s was a, let's say, negotiation process with Russians, and they promised us if Moldova will accept to introduce in our constitution principle of neutrality, maybe this will help to solve the Transnistrian conflict, and Transnistria will become again territory of Moldova without any kind of, let's say, efforts from Chisinau. Chisinau accepted this, and in 94, in our constitution was introduced principle of neutrality. And finally, after many years, we understand that this didn't help us to solve Transnistrian settlement process. In the same time, our army became weaker. And after the large aggression against Ukraine, we understand that neutrality will not protect us. No any promises from abroad, including especially from Russian Federation, will not protect us from some aggressions. And our understanding now is that it's necessary to invest in our army and to establish the dialogue with all the main partners. Due to the fact that we have this neutrality principle in our constitution, at this stage, we are not discussing about joining to some alliance. It's not allowed taking into account this principle in constitution. But in the same time, these are not blocking our interaction and cooperation with partners, with alliance and let's say neighboring countries. After 2022, our approach is that we will accept as much as possible from the possibility to interact with NATO. We will try to have very good and deep interaction without joining. I understand that it's difficult to explain, but constitution are not allowing at this stage to join. And we try to find other solution till the moment we'll add when other decision on this will be taken by our inhabitants, citizens. At this stage, investments in military budget increase. Our understanding that army is necessary. At some moment, it was some attempts to close, to let's say, to abolish military service, to close our army, that Moldova didn't need army. And now the approach is changed. Interaction with NATO will increase, but this will be done without joining officially to NATO. All the programs will be accepted. All the cooperation, possible cooperation, will be done. And in the same time, according with the principle of neutrality, they are not, let's say, blocking the interaction with NATO. We are not joining, and in the same time, we have the right to protect ourselves. In case of necessity, including neutral states have the rights and possibility to cooperate with the security alliance, with other countries, in the way to protect our territory. At this stage, the main risks for Moldova are coming from Russian Federation. We have Russian military forces on our territory. We have 12% of our territory under Russian occupation. And the only country that insists on our neutrality till now, it was only Russian Federation. And we see that this neutrality didn't help us to remove these forces from our territory. And second, this didn't help us to solve the Transnistrian conflict according with the will of Moldovan inhabitants. This means that maybe further the approaches of Moldovan citizens will change. At this stage, we see the, let's say, gradual change of our understanding of NATO, of simple inhabitants. If before NATO was perceived as an aggressive alliance during Soviet era, now this is changing and people more and more understand that we need to rethink our security, to rethink our formula of security and defense due to the fact that just word of neutrality will not protect us. We understand this. This is the reason that we are trying to change the approaches and the investment in our army. Second, we try to improve the interaction with Romania and Ukraine. Third, we try to implement all the interaction with NATO without joining NATO at this stage, till the moment when the constitution will be changed, if the inhabitants will decide this. Other topics is that the Ukrainians are fighting now, and due to the fact that they are resisting, the risk of, let's say, for Moldova, it's not so high how long Ukrainian will resist. We understand this, and we will try to change our approaches and understanding, and in the same time, we try to support our partners from Ukraine to resist to this military aggression from Russian Federation. If Ukrainians will become part of the NATO, this just will, let's say, remove the subject of joining of Moldova due to the fact that at that moment Moldova will be protected by Ukraine as a part of NATO, and we will be, let's say, inside of territory of NATO from all the side. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much. I think it was a good start, and thank you for sharing that. Now I would like to give the floor to Tornike Parulava to elaborate on Georgia's experience, again on the same topic, on the path of NATO integration, how it was going, and where we are. So thank you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Before going to Georgian issue, I would like to shortly echo what our Ukrainian colleague mentioned about deepening relations with the alliance and not joining. And I think in the history of NATO partnerships, we have these precedents when, for example, two countries, Finland and Sweden, both were in reality neutral countries, but they had a very close interaction with the alliance. And when talking about Georgia's integration process, I very often used the word Finlandization previously, that we saw that when political decision was taken to join, Finland joined in less than 1 year. And the reason why it happened was very, very clear. The Finland had such a deep level of interoperability, both military and political, that when political decision was taken to join, there was no obstacle on the way to resolve. There was no practical issue which was blocking Finland from joining, and that's why we saw this very fast-track integration process by Finland. So I think in the experience, Finnish and Danish experience has very good examples which we can use how to prepare a country for membership and wait for the right political momentum. Now going back to Georgia. for many years, for almost for 2 decades, not almost, for last 2 decades, NATO integration process has been a driving force for transformation and reform process in Georgia. Georgia's defense and security sector, and I mean wider defense and security sector, not defense ministry and defense forces, but basically entire security sector was transformed and reformed based on NATO recommendations and based on NATO standards. For the last 2 decades, Georgia undertook very significant institutional reforms in defense and security sector to make sure that we are that our systems are NATO compatible. And when I say systems, I don't mean it's not about military systems or communication systems, but I mean entire sector of defense and security. This was a two-way process. NATO was for probably last 10 years was the largest donor to Georgia's defense and security sector. Before Ukraine and before 2022, SNGP, substantial NATO Georgia package, was largest for assistance package that NATO had with any country. SNGP also was a backbone, a foundation of Georgian reform process and reform agenda. So we had a NATO core team deployed to Georgia. We had a specific projects. Some of them had resident experts, which were based here in Tbilisi. Some of them had non-resident experts. But altogether, during the last decade, more than a decade, almost 20 projects were run under the SNGP umbrella, and we implemented very significant reforms in that context, and we transformed basically entire defense and security sector, but defense forces most importantly. Just to demonstrate the level of interoperability, I would simply give you the numbers. Basically, all units of Georgian land forces have served at least one rotation in Afghanistan under the ISAF and RSM missions. Georgia was the largest per capita troop contributor to the mission and the largest non-NATO contributor to the mission. At the peak of our deployment, we had a brigade-size unit deployed in Afghanistan. And when we talk about Afghanistan, we have to remember that we were deployed not in the north, not in the place where stabilization operations were conducted, but we were deployed in the south, in the most volatile regions of Afghanistan. Georgian units had their own area of responsibility where they conducted their own operations. So obviously this deployment together with the NATO assistance programs and projects created an unprecedented level of interoperability. And in formal and informal discussions in both cases, it was said that Georgian defense and security sector is ready for NATO membership. Unfortunately, we can't, and probably still is ready. I'm pretty sure that that the level of interoperability still stays quite high, because we still have some parts of SNGP projects continuing in the defense ministry with the less support from allies, but still some projects still do continue. But unfortunately, we can't say the same thing about the political aspect of integration process. And here, the beginning of the war in Ukraine was a timeline when our integration process started to stall. Unfortunately, after the beginning of war in Ukraine, after the beginning of Russia's full-scale military aggression against Ukraine in 2022, the ruling party in Georgia decided that the normal road of development of Georgia's foreign and security policy was not suitable anymore for the new reality created by the war, and slowly the process of NATO integration, process of Georgia's NATO integration started to slow down and at the end to stall. Level of political dialogue is reduced to almost zero. We don't have ministerial level meetings anymore, while before that, before 2022, there was no NATO ministerial without NATO Georgia meeting taking place, or Georgia taking place in one of the ministerial formats. The ambassadorial level meetings are also almost zero. And we still have some number of working level political committee. It's not called political committee anymore, but at the level of political advisors is still taking place to review those projects which are still running and which are still implemented. The current approach towards enlargement is playing on the side of Georgian government, because now they blame everything on NATO side, that there is no appetite for enlargement in NATO, and therefore we are not pushing it. But obviously it's not the right approach. In our experience, there have been different approaches to NATO enlargement during the different phases of our integration process, but Georgian approach was always forthcoming, always pushy, and on the other side there was the reaction was different. Sometimes there was more appetite, sometimes there was less appetite, but it never affected how we were pushing this issue. Unfortunately, right now we have a situation when current Georgian government is not pushing this issue at all at the political level. You don't hear the NATO integration process in domestic political debate. Neither you can hear it in the speeches of foreign minister or prime minister when they make their appearances abroad. So basically, right now we can easily and confidently say that Georgia's integration process is stalled, is paused, and the prospect is very unclear when and how we can unfreeze this process. because, as I said, the situation inside the alliance and the discussions inside the alliance is not playing on our aspirant side at this moment. Yeah, probably I will start here and.
Great. Thank you, Czernika. It was a great overview. You also jumped a little bit further to the to the questions that we plan to discuss today. But I hope we will have a chance to explore and expand them a little bit more to the end of the discussion. Now I would like to give the floor to our colleague from Ukraine, Maxim. Please elaborate on the experience of Ukraine on NATO enlargement path, NATO integration path. Sorry, Tornike knows this better than I do. That for quite some time we were together in the same cluster and the same group together. Georgia and Ukraine were together, and at some point the path was split, and our, directions are different right now. So please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good evening, colleagues. Thank you for this opportunity to present the point of view about Ukrainian integration into NATO. So Ukrainian path or cooperation with NATO, it actually began as a cooperation already in 1992 as when Ukraine joined North Atlantic Cooperation Council. So it's a quite a long path. Then Ukraine joined Partnership for Peace, and the new impetus to cooperation started in 1997 when Ukraine signed a Charter on Distinguishing Partnership with NATO. After that, in 5 years, actually, Ukraine switched already from cooperation to the membership as a goal. First, it was set in 2002, so about 24 years ago, when that time Ukrainian President Kuchma, in his decree, enacted the decision of National Security and Defense Council about NATO membership as a goal, and this decree was further approved by Ukrainian Parliament the same year. So since that time, we can count the Ukrainian official path to NATO membership as a goal. Then Ukraine and NATO had action plans, then which were changed by annual national programs of cooperation later. There were a lot of joint working groups on reforms working. So since that time, Ukraine was actually working on approaching to NATO standards and implementing them. It should be stressed that from the very beginning, actually, Ukraine was not only a partner, not only the receiver of some support from NATO, including in reforms, but also a contributor, because now it's more obvious and often it is spoken that Ukraine is a contributor to North Atlantic security, including in the declaration on the last NATO summit, it is stated, but actually Ukraine contributes to NATO peacekeeping missions since mid-90s, participating in NATO missions in former Yugoslavia, then in Ukraine participating in NATO missions in Iraq, in Afghanistan, in Mediterranean operations like Active Endeavour, then in sea operations in Somalia, and actually a long list of other operations by NATO. Ukraine contributed even then, despite it was not maybe that much obvious for the Western audience, because there was not as many information about that in Western media. Actually, by 2008 Bucharest summit, when allies agreed that Ukraine and Georgia would become NATO members, Ukraine already had considerable path towards not only cooperation with NATO, but integration in some way with NATO and path to NATO membership. And actually, that Georgia and Ukraine did not get membership action plan and some clear date at Bucharest summit about membership. It was like a concession to NATO and a huge mistake made by NATO at the time, because Moscow has repeatedly demonstrated that it perceives concessions and as a sign of weakness. At least that's how actually it is perceived by Moscow. And the same year, I remember it was Russia-Georgia war, and in 2014 became the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Which later turned into full-scale war. And actually, when the Russian invasion of Ukraine began in 2014, it was the time, quite short period in Ukraine-NATO relations, when Ukraine had a non-alignment status envisaged in its legislation, and during that period, actually, Ukraine did not have NATO membership as a goal. That did not prevent actually from Russian invasion, because Ukraine restored the NATO membership as a goal only in 2017. It was 3 years after Russia already occupied Crimea and parts of eastern regions of Ukraine, Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast. So cooperation with NATO in the line of membership goal began, and it continues quite actively, and it progresses quite actively practically. But unfortunately, it's not about for the current period about some actual date of Ukrainian membership. What we see in progress, we see the progress and support of Ukrainian membership among NATO members. That the most important is that we see from the polls that there is an increase in support of Ukraine membership of NATO among the population of NATO countries. And given that these countries are democracies, governments should implement the will of the people. So it's the prospects of membership like are approaching, but it's more like a practical progress, but which is not institutionalized by some set of data, and even the membership action plan is not on the table. Maybe it's even needed or not needed already now, because Ukraine already actually passed that way and is much closer to NATO than many countries which became NATO members previously. And what we see in Ankara summit declaration, that it is directly stated that Ukraine contributes to transatlantic security. And if we open the North Atlantic Treaty, the establishing treaty of NATO, Article 10 about the NATO enlargement, we see there that the country which want to join NATO should contribute to the security of the North Atlantic area. So that's actually what is stated in Ankara summit declaration that Ukraine actually fulfills. So the question is that politically, not all NATO members are ready actually to accept Ukraine as a member because of their fears that it may activate Article 5 and maybe involve NATO countries to active conflict with Russia. But maybe we'll talk about it later, as well as about this NATO study of enlargement on 1991, which set this criteria that country with territorial dispute and in conflict cannot become a NATO member, which is not like a part of legally binding things in NATO, but which are still following by some now NATO members, despite it is actually obviously outdated actually rule. Here I will stop maybe here and then continue with the other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Maxim. Thank you, all of you. I think it was really a good overview. What was the experience of these countries in this process, and where do we stand now? This is like the perspective from these countries, but also there's another thing: what's going on internationally, what's going on in international security environment. So that's why I would like to go to the next point of our discussion, which is what is the current state of NATO enlargement in general? And is it currently increasingly constrained by geopolitical realities? So what do you think? Whoever wants to go first? Monika, maybe you can start.
Sure. very, very difficult question, but at the same time, very, very interesting question. If we look at the Hague Summit declaration, but not declaration, but the summit itself, and then Ankara summit, we can clearly see that open door is not on the agenda at this moment. It is clear that there are member states and actually a member state, and it's United States, that at this moment does not like to have NATO enlargement debate. Is not ready to have this debate, and if you look at the strategic documents adopted during the Trump presidency, there is a clear opposition to the idea of enlargement. To a certain way, we can say that some aspects of those documents contradict the NATO open door policy and contradict Washington Treaty at all. But I don't want to go into that direction, but it is very clear that currently Trump administration is avoiding the issue of enlargement. But I do believe this situation will change. It will change. It will change definitely when current president leaves the office and completes its term. But I don't exclude also the possibility that it will be changed even before his departure by his own administration. Because one thing we have learned from current administration is that they don't hesitate to change their approaches when they see it necessary and when they see it feasible. So, and at the same time, we have to understand that there is unfinished business. Definitely, there is Europe whole, free and at peace is unfinished without NATO enlargement. We have Balkans, which is, even if we leave aside Georgia right now, we have Balkans, we have Moldova, we have Ukraine, which from military technical point of view, in the new European security architecture, will be much easier to defend those territories as part of the alliance rather than leaving them outside. Same goes for Georgia as well, but now I'm trying to distance myself from my Georgian nationality and trying to be as unbiased as possible. So without Ukraine, new European architecture is unimaginable, and I think everyone agrees with me in that. Even most Eurosceptic experts would agree now that in new security architecture, where conventional military threat is very dominant in threat perception, modern Ukrainian army serves as a backbone of future European army, which could be formed in the case of aggression. So I think Ukraine already secured its place there. Geographically, without Moldova securing the western shore of the Black Sea will be almost impossible to achieve, and leaving this small country in a shadow of Russian occupied territories and Russian influence, potential Russian malign influence, does not make sense. And in a more broader strategic picture, without Georgia, Black Sea security, I think, will be incomplete, because from southeastern shores of the Black Sea, Russia can destabilize Black Sea very effectively. Therefore, Georgia's membership there is, I believe, also should be part of the new security arrangement, which will be formed after the end of the war in Ukraine. I think I also absolutely share the point of view that that discussions about territorial claims, discussions about border disputes, and those technical discussions should not overshadow big political decisions. And the big political decision should be that Europe, whole, free, and at peace, requires those countries to be inside alliance, not outside. I think one of the lessons which we have to learn from the very dramatic events taking place in Ukraine is that the theory of buffer zones has proved to be wrong. Leaving the territory in between with the optimistic prognosis and that it will serve as a buffer zone between us and Russia proved to be wrong. Same goes for Finland's NATO membership. I think there as well, the idea of buffering from Russia proved to be wrong, and same goes for Ukraine, same goes for Georgia. I think widen Euro-Atlantic alliance is a recipe for future European security architecture. Therefore, I think the current lack of interest in open door discussions in the alliance, I think, is a temporary issue. This will be changed most probably in nearest future, and we should be ready for this change. We should be ready for this window of opportunity which opens. And when I say we, first of all, I mean Georgia, because right now Georgia needs to do very significant work on its own side to make sure that it is ready for this new opportunity which will open. Yeah, I will stop here, and I will let other speakers also share their point of view.
Great, thank you, Tordike. Anybody else wants to add something on this? Because I think this is a really important issue. Because on the one hand, we have this our domestic issues and our domestic problems here in Georgia, but on the other hand, for instance, we have Ukrainian experience, which is like which proves, and Ukraine demonstrates every day, that it actually can be security providers to not only Euro-Atlantic space, but we've seen Ukrainian assistance to other countries worldwide, especially in counter-drone capabilities. And on the other hand, we have those geopolitical constraints and kind of unwillingness, sort of, let's say, by the allies to speak about NATO enlargement process. So anybody else wants to? I think Maxim wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, yes. Thank you. Actually, now, unfortunately, membership remains as an open door policy in principle, but not in practice. That was what we can see. That also NATO officially rejects the idea that any country, especially Russia, has a veto over enlargement decisions. But in practice, we see that Russia has so far de facto like veto right on NATO enlargement to the east, especially in cases for Ukraine and Georgia, and Russia here actually uses the ideas which were in that document NATO study on enlargement, where it was written that the countries that have territorial disputes cannot become NATO members, and that was used actually by Moscow when it waged its aggression against Georgia and Ukraine to stop moving of these countries to NATO membership. So that was like the idea that set in the document on enlargement by NATO itself, published, and this idea was used by Russia like to block effectively the NATO enlargement. So here we see that this open door policy, while being declared, it doesn't work in practice because of this outdated approach maybe towards enlargement. That study on NATO enlargement, it was developed in 1995, like a part of post-Cold War situation. And it actually was, we can say that it was like a result of maybe of post-Cold War misinterpretation of Russia, misunderstanding of Russia. We remember like in early 90s, there was a kind of euphoria in the West and beliefs that relations with Russia will be a partnership, and actually, only few maybe politicians and experts in the West, they, like Brzezinski, for example, they warned that we should be cautious. We should not believe that it's an end of history and liberal democracy won all over the world. That we should remember about some imperial deeply rooted ideas in Russia. But what was done, it was done. So, and still, actually, this territorial conflicts on Georgia and in Ukraine caused by Russian aggression, they are still used by many politicians in NATO countries as a maybe pretext not to prevent integration of Georgia and Ukraine to NATO, which I believe is a completely outdated situation, because now it's clear that we are not living in this post-Cold War euphoria world. Now it's a clear understanding of situation, and maybe NATO should return to its politics, which was during the times of establishment of NATO, and that vision of situation surely adjusted to current situation. And also this fear that we hear quite often in the West from politicians of the NATO member states, that including Georgia, Ukraine into NATO, involve NATO countries into open conflict with Russia, open war with Russia. They actually remind quite strongly about these fears in the beginning of large-scale Russia-Ukraine war, when many politicians in the same countries were demonstrated fears about deep strikes into Russian territory, when they were very cautious about providing military equipment to Ukraine. We remember that voices against providing tanks to Ukraine. Then about aircrafts to Ukraine, and all the time it was stressing this idea that would involve NATO in direct war with Russia, and life proved actually it was wrong position. Now we see the unprecedented military support of NATO countries providing to Ukraine, and we see that actually it didn't lead to that involvement of NATO into war with Russia, because Russia actually is the country who is less of all interested in this involvement in war with NATO, having much less possibilities than NATO countries. So actually the fear should be not on NATO side in this issue, and these outdated ideas about the enlargement which not help NATO to become stronger now, but actually just show the way to its opponents, authoritarian regimes, how they can effectively block the enlargement of NATO and how they can leave countries in gray zone without credible security guarantees. They should be revised, and NATO should move, maybe adjusting its politics on enlargement to current situation. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Maxim. Dr. Yeah, please, Mr. Balin, if you'd like to add something.
I make only a few statements. Not only European countries and NATO need US. US need European countries and NATO as a partner in this changing world and all the crises that are around us. US will be interested to have a real active partners, and from this point of view, NATO and European countries can be such kind of partners that will help United States. And in the same time, at this stage, we observe in example of Ukraine, if at the beginning, let's say US was one of the most active partners that provided support from the beginning to Ukrainians, after this European countries understand the risks and change their attitude and their approaches towards the conflict, and they understand the risks that are coming from East, and they are, let's say, become the engine of this support to Ukraine at this stage, which means that United States stimulate NATO countries from European unions to become more active. In the same time, the expenditures of NATO countries from European Union increased. Third, I think that further the approaches towards the countries that are not members at this stage will change. Ukrainian army at this stage is the most experienced and the strongest one in Europe, and NATO need such kind of army and such kind of country inside of alliance. NATO is a defensive alliance. We need such kind of experience, how to defend our territory, how to defend our countries. And our colleague Parulava say also about Moldova and Georgia. There are some, let's say, buffer zones around the NATO, which can create some troubles and problems inside of NATO. When we are discussing on Moldovan case, in case if something happened in Transnistria or on Moldovan territory, if we will be aggressed by somebody from outside, this will create a real crisis in some countries from NATO, which means that in context of ceasefire agreement or some solution on Ukrainian war, the subject of joining of new states on NATO will be raised. NATO need to let's say, to extend and to develop their readiness to protect the territory and alliance members. Second, the United States also need a good and good partners in Europe, and from this point of view, including Ukraine and the active European countries, I think such kind of partnership will provide a new, let's say, will change the image of NATO. NATO will become again a credible actor, active actor, and with the good perspective in the future. Countries need NATO, and all the people understand this after the war in 2022 was launched by Russia in Ukraine. We understand this, and we hope that NATO will accept new members. We need Ukraine, let's say, as a member state. And this will be, I think that such kind of decision will be taken on the framework of settlement of war in Ukraine. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. We are going to the end to the time allocated to this online discussion. But before closing and before ending it, I would like to give you the floor, all of you, like it is provide your perspective for the future in the context of NATO enlargement in 2-3 sentences, maybe very briefly, how it should go and what implications will it have if successful, what will be the implications for European security? I mean, if NATO enlargement will be successful, is that question. So in 2-3 sentences, and with that, we will just close this discussion. Maybe like in the round, first Tornike, then Maxim, and then Mr. Bellin. So.
So let's hope, yes, that NATO will adjust its enlargement policy to the current realities. And I see already we see the clear understanding, yes, in NATO also that Ukraine joining actually will strengthen NATO, not weaken it. And knowing that Ukraine is a part of NATO, and remembering about Article 5, any potential aggression will think many times before attacking any other NATO countries like Baltic states, for example. Yes, so Baltic states will feel more secure having Ukraine in NATO than not having it there. But beside it, surely what should be think about NATO if NATO further expands, that it's promoting democratic stability into Europe also. That's an important issue, because we see now that in the world when it is rather divided between democracies and authoritarian countries, and this division is more strengthening, that countries, democratic countries, which are the members of collective security, they need more promoting stability, these democratic principles, because NATO is not only about security. NATO is about all of these democratic principles, rule of law, good governance. All these principles are also in NATO. And this new trend of strengthening European pillar of NATO, as becoming European pillar of NATO as strong as the United States, it surely also needs enlargement, because without including some new countries like Ukraine into NATO, European part of NATO so far cannot actually be as strong contributor to the collective security as it should be in NATO. And here it is also in line actually with strengthening the maybe some security trend within the European Union itself, because the European Union also has Article 42.7 about collective security in Europe. So given that anyway Ukraine and Georgia are moving towards, and Moldova, by the way, are moving towards membership in European Union, it is logical also that these efforts are combined with path towards NATO to make it more effective, to more effectively use resources, and to more effectively strengthen the European pillar of NATO. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Tornike, maybe?
I think one of the things which war in Ukraine showed us is that the modern crises are not contained by borders of alliances. The fact that Ukraine was not a NATO member did not play the role, and attack on Ukraine still created a huge crisis in Europe. I think this clearly proves that the fact that you leave country outside of the alliance, when geographically and geopolitically this country is part of your region and your neighborhood, leaving this country outside of the alliance is not the solution. Another lesson which we have to learn is that appeasement policy towards Russia does not work. It does not bring results. And at the end, we have to remember that enlargement was a huge success story in Europe. NATO enlargement, together with the EU enlargement, created the largest group of democratic countries in Europe, which share the same values, which are democracies and are resilient to modern threats. So in that context, as I said before, it will be business unfinished if we leave countries like Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia outside of the alliance. I think this understanding is already there in European capitals, and I think we will see this the same approach very soon on the other side of the Atlantic.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. And last but not least, Mr. Belen, please.
Yeah, when we are discussing about perspective future, I think it's true that European pillar will have an important role with what will happen further. We have Ukraine and Moldova that are moving very quick towards European integration. We try to become a member as soon as possible, and this is let's say our wish, and we hope to achieve this goal as soon as possible. Europeans understand that risks from Russia, it's a real risk for Europe, and they are changing their approaches, and this is the reason that they become more active in European approach towards NATO. They become more active, they increase their expenditure, they become more active in supporting Ukraine. They change their approaches toward joining European Union of countries of Moldova, Georgia, and Ukraine. From this point of view, I think that Europeans will try to become more active. They will try to increase the role of and maybe to found a, let's say, transitory solution of joining NATO. To have this transitory solution with joining to European Union, to have some, let's say, security agreements inside of European Union provided to such kind of countries like Moldova, like Ukraine, and in the same time to have some countries that are not member of Ukraine, like Turkey, which also have a great potential and important role in our region and zone. And from this point of view, I think that European will become more active, and this will influence also further at the next step, joining of such kind of countries of like Georgia or like Ukraine or Moldova to NATO in, let's say, in future. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for sharing your perspectives. We have some questions in Q&A, but unfortunately, well, our time is up. So thank you, all of you who joined us today. Thank you for staying with us until then, because it's a Friday evening. I understand that, and I'm especially thankful to all of you who still managed to spend this evening with us. Thank you to all of the speakers, Tornike, Maxim, Mr. Belen. I think we had wonderful discussion. It was really interesting. It was timely, and this is the most important thing. Thank you once again. Thank you to the team behind Strategic Security Initiative. Stay with us, follow us, and this recording will also be available on YouTube. We will also provide short video cuts of the discussion with the interesting points that our speakers delivered. Thank you, and see you soon with the next discussion. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.